Oh, good. Busy. I'm working with Ming right now to find a place. So,
Yeah, he just joined the call.
yeah. Hey, Ming.
Ming probably took this while he was going to the washroom or something. So,
Oh, he's gone.
okay. No, yeah, no, we've been talking about your situation on the back end.
Mm,
So, yeah, I know that you're kind of taking the next steps, which is great.
yeah.
Uh, who are you working with on the financing side?
Well, right now, two people. Originally, it was Hugo,
Yeah,
and then we went with the second. What's his name?
Jacob.
Jacob. Yeah.
Yeah,
Jacob.
very good.
That sounds like Sean.
Yes.
Hey,
I,
Sean.
rec- I recognize the SK. No, I was just talking with Sean. I know that. Um, sorry, I need to mute this.
Hey, Matt, do you have? Oh, yeah, we're just getting some crazy feedback just now.
Yeah, that's me. I had my iPad on as well. That's why.
Uh,
Um, I had my iPad ready just in case I was going to. Um, I wanted to write something.
mhm.
How do I? There, is that better? Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, no, that's good. I was just talking to Jacob yesterday, so good. I told him that we need to get yours and all of our clients actually mortgage qualifications up higher.
Yeah. It's way more of a challenge than I thought it was going to be.
It is. It is. It's a surprise to everyone, especially if they haven't bought a property in a couple of years. The
Hmm.
landscape is because I know you have your condo, right?
Yeah.
And the landscape has changed significantly. People are very unpleasantly surprised when they have to re-enter the real estate market and trying to get financing, trying to get pre-approvals, pre-positioning. They're like, WTF, I qualified for X last time. Now it's like X divided by 2 or some
Yeah.
shit,
Yeah.
right? No, I get it.
And we
It's
were
tough.
even thinking about like a backup plan is moving into a condo, and a condo is even harder than getting a house, which I really didn't expect, but
Yeah,
I guess it
it's
makes sense because of the
yeah,
condo
it's
fees.
yeah the additional rents from the house as well
Yeah,
can
yeah.
help with the totally get it. So, anyways, it's 12:01. We got a handful of folks who have joined, so thank you for joining. We got Sean here. I saw Jennifer Phillips, who I haven't seen in a long time. Jen and Cody. Um, they, I thought I heard a baby in the background. Was that a baby? They went on mute.
Yeah,
So
I have a baby now.
you have a baby?
Yeah, he's on my lap.
Congratulations! That's
Wow.
amazing.
I thought Matt was being presumptuous.
Yeah, no. Yeah, I had a baby in May.
Oh
Oh
my
my
gosh,
God.
we had a baby in June. No,
No,
July. July. Sorry, their birthday.
congratulations.
Yeah, it's our second. So anyway, that's awesome. Good for you.
I know I've been meaning to come in person, but I haven't been able to.
Hey, this is just as
Yeah, it's a
good.
little tough with a kid. So,
I should make it a requirement that everyone has to turn on their video. Like I'm staring at myself right now.
you'd see my back pocket then, Matt.
I'd see your bum.
Yeah.
Okay,
I was being polite there.
nice. Okay, and Sherman. I see Sherman. I see green tea, like green tea ice cream. I see Alex. Okay, so welcome. There's a small handful of people. People can continue to trickle in. I've been MIA for a number of months now, and Ming's been backing me up and really taking the lead on this and meetup. So I don't know what's going on really. So I'm really kind of just poking my head out of the groundhog hole that I've been in. But yeah, let's just take it from here. What's on your guys' mind? Hey, Sess. Someone who's willing to share video. I like it.
So just a friendly reminder of how these Coffeehouse chats work. Basically, it's an open hour. So you guys have access to us to ask any questions that you may have, any themes or topics that you'd like covered, you want our opinions on anything. now's your chance to ask. These basically were born out of people saying they would love to have more access to us, to ask these kind of questions. So yeah, I'll open up to the floor, see if there's any questions. If not, I know I was asked a question by Cecily. I'm not sure if she's able to join yet.
She just joined.
Oh, just joined? Okay. So we'll see if there's anything on the floor. If not, we'll jump into Cecily's question that she sent to me ahead of time.
All right, Cess, go. You're on mute.
Hey.
Hey.
Yeah. I was just wondering if you could go through a little bit of the investment and return calculations that are on the investment calculator. I'm curious why and how they differ from the standard, like just return on investment.
Sure.
Cash on cash versus equity on cash, appreciation.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, to give a bit of background for the folks on the call, basically, this was born out of a conversation Cecily and I are having, and she was talking about a financial planner. And many of our clients use financial planners, and to get kind of an overall picture of their financial health. And I don't want to talk bad about financial planners, but just be very cautious of how they're compensated, right? So there's a couple types of financial planners. The most common you'll see are those that are compensated through sale of equities, right? So they make money because they're selling you mutual funds or something along those lines. Obviously, you're going to get opinions that are skewed towards sale of equities as a result. The other type are kind of fee-based. So, you're paying them $100 an hour, $500 an hour, whatever it happens to be for them to look at your portfolios. That's better because they're not as tied to the sale of equities. Though if they sell you an equity, they still get money off of that. They're less incented in that way. But I think the biggest problem tends to be they don't know how to evaluate real estate properly. Most of them only understand very basic returns from real estate, and that's cash on cash. So cash on cash is basically the amount of cash you're putting in to acquire a property. Let's just say it's $50,000 for ease of calculations. You put in $50,000. How much cash are you getting back on an annualized basis?
Ming,
right?
Actually, if I interject, I can actually just pull up our website, and I can pull up
sure.
the actual calculator. I'm just having trouble doing a screen share.
It's okay. You've been in a groundhog hole for a couple of months.
Yeah, sorry. I thought I was sharing my iPad screen. Is anyone seeing it? Is anyone seeing my iPad screen? No?
No.
I'm not.
Sorry. I don't know what the hell I'm doing.
I just see your face.
I'm waiting for it to get to boil again.
No, but
It's not on boil yet.
said something else, don't they?
So anyway, I'll just talk through, what we're, the major kinds of calculations. So if an investor, if a financial planner knows the very basics, what they'll talk about is appreciation, because everybody understands that. You buy it for $500,000, you sell it for $600,000. What's the value of the property that's changed over time? We call that cash on appreciation because it's easier to understand, but it's basically the return of how much money you're putting in and how much value has gone up over on your property on an annualized basis. Our calculator that we have on our website allows.
Okay, I might have just got it up. Does anyone see it now? Yeah?
Yep.
Yeah, cool.
So it allows you to change that variable. So Matt, if you change the investment analysis performance period from 1 year, just put in, I think, like 5 years, for example.
Okay, so I'll start from the beginning. I'd let Ming walk through it, but Ming's phone is in his back pocket right now. So, okay. So what Ming was talking about was if you go to volitionprop.com, this is our website, and you click on this right here, this is really our bread and butter. This is our, like, the best stuff we have to offer. Actually, no, we got better stuff than this, but this is really important. This is a step beyond what you're going to find anywhere else. If you talk to any other real estate investors, if you go up on other people's, cash flow analysis websites or calculators, they're going to be very basic. And this is a cut above, and I'll explain why. So if you go to volitionprop.com, click on VIP investment calculator up in the upper right corner, you'll land here. So let's say a hypothetical investment of $1 million, right? A purchase price, 20% down payment. That means you have a mortgage of $800,000, you have a down payment of $200,000, and roughly your land transfer tax and closing costs, which are required at the time of close. So good so far, Seth? Make sense? Yeah, okay. Okay, so, and then let's say, actually, it's actually better if we use 1.2, because you can't actually buy, it's hard to buy anything for actually $1 million right now. So let's say that we get, this is a basic, let's say turnkey. When I say turnkey, it's still a very basic asset. It's a turnkey triplex. That's roughly about 1.2 million, which is actually quite hard to find these days. Still, I want to caveat that. But generally speaking, if you could find one, let's just say that you could find one that would be about $2,200 in rent on the second floor, $2,200 rent on the main floor, and roughly $1,400 for the basement unit. So you'd have roughly a $5,800 in rent, let's just say. Follow me so far? So this is like a main floor. Let's say it's a one bedroom, pretty good condition, and you have the same thing on the second floor, one bedroom, pretty good condition, 2,200, and then you have a basement unit that's in pretty good condition, average ceiling height in the basement, $1,400 bucks. So $5,800 is your total rent. Monthly expenses, roughly speaking, for an asset like this, it's about $375 for property taxes. It's about $175 for insurance, and hydro is roughly $200, gas is about $150, and water is about $125, roughly speaking. So your expense, sorry, I put gas at $125. Your expenses is roughly $1,000 bucks. This will obviously be a plus or minus depending on the actual property, the size of the property, how well it's insulated, and it's going to be variable from month to month. But on average, we've done a lot of these properties. We know, generally speaking, it'll be about $1,000 bucks. If you've got a 2.5 story, it might go up a little more. If you have 2-bedroom units, it might go up a little more. If it's a smaller property, maybe it goes down. If you have a duplex, maybe it goes down a little bit. But this is a safe bet, about $1,000 bucks. Okay. So with interest rates where it's at right now, we could use a 3% interest rate at 30-year amortization. So that's about $4,047, right? So as you follow me so far, so we have $5,800 in rent, we have $1,000 in expenses, and we have $4,047 on our mortgage. Make sense so far? You good, Sess? Okay. Okay, cash flow. So generally speaking, our cash flow on an asset like this should be around, $500 bucks. Could be up a little more, could be a little bit less. On a basic asset like this, $500 bucks is a pretty good target. There's going to be people who are going to also identify the fact that this does not include maintenance repair, doesn't include vacancy, doesn't include property management. Those are things that are superfluous and up and above. Not superfluous, it's the wrong word. Those things are optional things because they don't happen every month. What we've identified, these are our hard expenses. These are the ones you have to pay every month. You have to pay the hydro, you have to pay gas, you have to pay insurance, you have to pay water, you have to pay property tax. You may be able to defer the maintenance. You may not need a property manager. And if you're doing stuff properly, you shouldn't have vacancy. If you're buying the right spot, catering to the right tenant profile, so on and so forth. You good so far? Around $500, in this case, about $750 of cash flow, right? This cash flow, just to be clear, is not always true real cash flow, because this cash flow, or at least a portion of it, gets recycled back into the property, paying for, you know, when you have a certain repair that needs to be called you need to call a plumber or a roofer or something like that. So, but for all intents and purposes, this is money, this is cash that will hit your bank account, and it'll be extra cash that will continue to build your reserve fund over time. So we therefore do consider it as part of the return. Here we go, investment analysis. So this is kind of getting to the meat and potatoes. Investment analysis. Performance after 1 year. We'll analyze it after 1 year, and then we'll show you how it looks over time. Cash on cash. So as Ming was explaining, cash on cash is the return due to cash flow. So if let's say I have $753 of cash flow a month, I annualize it, so I multiply it by 12, and then I divide by, what do I divide by? Here's a good question. What do I divide by? What do you think you divide by, Cecily?
What you've put in, like your down payment?
Down payment plus
The expenses?
all your closing costs, right? Your land transfer tax and your closing costs, right? Does that make sense?
So basically all the cash that you used to buy it.
Exactly, that's correct.
Right, sorry, yes, because the cash flow already includes your expenses.
Yeah. So the reason I call this out is because a lot of people, thank you, Sherman. The reason I call this out is because a lot of people make the mistake of dividing this by the purchase price of the asset. That is incorrect. You don't divide by the purchase price. If you divide by the purchase price, you're getting a different metric. That's a different metric altogether. That metric doesn't actually help us very much. This metric helps us a lot more. It's called cash on cash. It's cash flow due to, it's a return due to cash flow. So I take my annualized cash flow, I divide by what we call our capital injection, right? Or total capital required, or however you want to define it. Down payment plus land transfer tax plus closing costs. What happens is I get a number. I get a percentage. That percentage, anywhere north of 1.8 to 2% is pretty good. In this case, in this hypothetical example, is 3.2. Right? So I now have one metric. Let's move on. I cannot yet compare to another asset class. It's incomplete. Next is equity on cash. Equity pay down on cash, mortgage pay down on cash, however you want to talk about it. What is this? Cecily, what is this?
How much your home value increases over the same capital costs?
Yeah, so this is the one that, just kind of going back to the financial planner piece, appreciation on cash is the thing they understand. We'll get to that in a bit. If they're a little more sophisticated, they understand cash on cash, but almost none of them really understand equity on cash. So Matt, you can walk us through exactly what equity on cash is.
If I make a mortgage payment, what is a mortgage payment? What are the two components that consist of a mortgage payment, that comprise a mortgage payment?
Principal and interest.
Exactly. Principal and interest, P&I, right? What is principal? What's the principal payment? What does that do?
It rises your equity, right?
It increases my equity through the reduction. Exactly, the reduction of the outstanding principal of the mortgage.
Yes.
Right? Does everyone follow? So if my mortgage originally, let's say it was originally, in this example, $960, I make my first mortgage payment. My first mortgage payment was $4,000, let's say. Roughly speaking, how much principal and how much interest? Roughly speaking, how much principal and how much interest are comprised of a mortgage payment? What percentage?
50?
It's roughly 50. You can use 50 as a benchmark. When interest rates go up, then it goes lower. When interest rates go down, the principal component can go higher. It's a little less than 50. You could call it like 40, 60 right now at today's interest rates. So basically, out of every mortgage payment, let's just say about 40% goes into reducing the principal. So let's just say 50-50 in this case for ease of calculation. Let's say 2,000 of the 4,000 is principal. How much is my outstanding mortgage after my first month of ownership, after I've made my first mortgage payment?
Minus 2,000.
Minus 2,000, right? So it's 958.
Right.
And month 2, month 3, month 4, month 5. If I accumulate 12 months of principal payments and I add them all up, in this particular example, it's 20,000. So you know how I said it's roughly 2,000? And then I said it's actually a little less than 2,000. If you divide 20,000 by 12, you'll see that's probably, I don't know, $1,800 or something like that. I'm pretty close, right? So what do I do with this number now? I have $20,000 I paid down of the mortgage, quote unquote. What do I do with this number to calculate my return?
Don't you have to divide by the cash you put in?
Exactly. So yes, Ty is correct. I similarly to cash on cash, I divide by the amount of cash I put in. Capital injection, which is defined as down payment plus land transfer plus closing costs. And in this case, if I take 20, whatever this number is, 20,000, divide by my capital injection, I get a return, an ROI of about 7%. Does that make sense so far?
Yeah. 7% is good.
7% is good. We're not even done. Okay, so we'll get to.
Sorry, before we leave that, I think this is, if you ever hear, investors talk about like the meat and potatoes of investing, this is the thing that's the meat and potatoes, because you're going to have your place rented out, and worst case, if it's not rented out, you're still making that mortgage payment. There's still a return that's being generated. So this is why it's so important to make sure that you're getting a place that you can have a renter in there paying your mortgage all the time, because you're getting 7% return. And this is the most guaranteed return out of the rest, because your cash flow can change as rent prices change. Your appreciation is going to change as market prices fluctuates. So this is really why, having a tenant in there that's a good tenant that's paying that rent every month is really the most important thing to your real estate business.
Exactly. So if you just take cash on cash and equity on cash, and if you add them together, that's what Ming's kind of talking about in terms of, how a lot of investors define this is cash on cash plus equity on cash. And you can see in this hypothetical example, it's very easy, let's say, to get an 8 to 10% return without even looking at appreciation, not even looking at the increase in property price, right? Yeah. Just cash on cash plus equity pay down on cash. Then
you compare that to your GIC, yeah, or your mutual fund.
Well,
right?
I mean, you have your mutual fund, you have your RSPs, you have everything else, and they go, okay, 7%. We can get you a 7% return, minus your MERs, minus all this other crap. You're in real estate, you can achieve greater than that in, just in cash on cash, cash flow, and equity pay down on cash. I don't even need my property price to increase. It should over time. Let's talk about that. So let's just say that we're in a market, in an environment where things are growing at 5% annually. 5% is kind of a standard number that we use. If you're more conservative, you can say 3%. If you're more aggressive, you can use 7%. Just to put in perspective, inflation is about 2%. So if you're conservative and you think you want to use a conservative estimate, 3% is a pretty conservative estimate. That's barely keeping above inflation. We use 5% because we're in Toronto. We're not in buttfuck nowhere. Where some of these places are like stagnant for like 30 years. So let's use 5%. So 5%, what am I taking 5% of? Cecily, what are we taking 5% of?
Sorry, Not purchase price, but
The
whatever
purchase
the
price.
house is valued.
Exactly. So you take your purchase price, you apply 5%, and that would be how much the property value would go up over the course of the 1 year. So at the end of the first year, 1.2 plus 60,000, it would be worth, in general, hypothetically speaking, 1.26. If I take that 60,000, then divide by my capital injection, I get another return. So I have basically, the way that we normally think about this is a 3-course meal. This is your cash flow, or your cash on cash is your appetizer. Your kind of meat and potatoes, as Ming called it. The equity paydown cash is your main course. And we should be happy just with appetizer and main course. Appreciation, that's dessert. That's dessert. We should be happy with just appetizer and main course. If we have dessert, that's even better. But we don't count on it necessarily, because our business model doesn't necessarily hinge on it. But it's great if we get it. Does that make sense, Sess? Okay, I see you nodding. So if I add these 3 suckers up, I get a total profit on the year of about 89,000. And if I add up this guy, and this guy, I have a total return of about 30%, 31%. So if I look at this and I go, okay, well, there's some assumptions built into it. I'm an engineer, for example, or I used to be, and I have a lot of engineer friends who they just love cutting you down. They love poking holes in everything you say, right? Engineers are annoying like that. And whenever I show something like this to them, they're like, yeah, but you're assuming X, Y, Z. And I go, okay, you know what? You're right. What if I don't assume X, Y, Z? What if I say, okay, let's say appreciation is only gonna be 3%. I still have a 22% return, 23% return. If I drop appreciation down to 0, I still have my cash on cash and my equity paid out on cash. I still have a 10% return, or 8 to 10% return. So you see how I now have a model where I can compare apples to other asset classes. I'm not using cap rate. People love to use cap rate. That's the incorrect. That's not an apples to apples to comparison. People love to talk about other metrics. This is the only metric that you can use to compare real estate to other asset classes.
Do you guys know what capitalization rate is?
No.
Okay, so maybe Matt, you can explain like what capitalization rate and why it doesn't apply, because when you start getting into real estate investing a little more, you'll start hearing the term cap rate thrown around everywhere, but it's not an apples to apples comparison with something like a mutual fund or another type of investment product. Cap rates are only good to compare other commercial investments. So,
exactly.
Yeah.
So basically, cap rates, you do not use cap rates when you're talking about single family, if you're talking about a condo, if you're talking about even small multifamily, 1 to 4 units. Where cap rates become applicable is when you're talking about large multifamily, larger, 5 units and above, or you're talking about commercial real estate. The reason is because if you look at the definition of cap rate and how it's calculated, a cap rate is basically take your gross rents minus your expenses, and you're left with your net operating income, NOI. And you take your NOI, annualize it, right? So you have your monthly NOI, you annualize it, multiply by 12, and then you divide by the purchase price. And then I'm left with some percentage. In this case, it's 4%, 5%.
Well,
So
what's
the problem,
missing from?
yeah.
Oh, I was just going to say, what's the problem with with cap rate is that all it's doing is looking at cash, right? How much money is that property making on a monthly basis? It doesn't look at appreciation, and it doesn't look at mortgage paydown. And the reason that commercial properties don't take that into account is because financing is very different on the commercial side, right? These may be funded through syndicated mortgages. They may be funded very different ways. So mortgage paydown is not something that's actually consistent on the commercial side. So it's not part of a commercial property calculation. And then the other part, which you're looking at appreciation, commercial properties don't appreciate in the same ways that a single family would. When you're looking at single family property, let's say your property is worth $1 million, but your neighbor is a very similar property, they sell for 1.2. Well, now the market dictates that your house is worth 1.2. That's not the case for commercial. If a 10-plex next to you and you have a 10-plex and that one sells for $3 million, it doesn't say a damn thing actually about how much your property is worth. And the reason is it's based on actually the cash performance of your property. So it depends on how much that property is making on a month-to-month basis, and that's how it's valuated. So that's why people use cap rates for commercial properties, but they're not the right calculation to use when looking at single family. And so this is also something that gets caught up when financial planners are looking at the valuation of real estate. They may have a little bit of knowledge and know that cap rate is a way of evaluating returns, but it's not the right way. So if they start looking at your condos or your small multifamilies and using cap rates to figure out what your return is, they're missing out two large areas of return.
And one big reason is because they don't understand, well, whoever's using cap rate incorrectly, you have to look to see how cap rate's actually calculated. It's your annual NOI, your net operating income, divided by your purchase price, right? It's basically assuming that you're buying the asset in cash. There's no mortgage payments that have been applied in this calculation. There's no equity pay down. It's assuming you're buying it in cash. So I mean, how realistic is that? So it's used to compare, as Ming said, between different real estate assets, but not between asset classes. Does that make sense? If you're looking at GICs and mutual funds and all that other crap, you have to use what we're showing you. You can't use cap rate. Anyway, hopefully that gives you enough of a kind of a background and enough vernacular and enough knowledge to have a decent conversation with your financial planner. Is that cool?
Yeah, it's been great. Thank you.
Yeah. Cool. Hopefully this was of value to other people too. Okay, let's change gears. Anyone else have any other questions? Oh, one last thing I want to show you. Sorry, one last thing. Performance over time. So look, our annual NOI here is 31.3%. Let's look over 2 years, over 3 years, over 4 years, over 5 years. This number, our annual ROI actually goes up over time. Our annualized annual ROI goes up over time. Not just our total ROI, of course our total ROI, but our annualized ROI is going up. It's actually a really, really interesting thing. I'm not going to get into it now, but basically what this is telling me is that the longer I hold the asset, the better my return. It's because of a bunch of things like rent increasing, compound appreciation, rents outpacing inflation. A bunch of things are actually happening, but I wanted to call this to your attention. We started off at roughly, 31% annualized ROI. After 5 years, your annualized ROI has gone up to 35%. So just by holding real estate, you actually do better and better over time. And that's one of the core tenets of the message that we sort of espouse and deliver, is that the important thing is to hold real estate over time. Let time do its thing. Time is the most important component of the success of real estate, actually. So you're just looking for an asset that you could hold over time. Good assets, of course.
Yeah.
Okay, now we can switch gears. Any other questions?
A bit of an open-ended question here. I'm not
Sure.
sure how to phrase it, but feel free to answer however you
Sure.
will.
Sorry, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Sherman.
Hi, Sherman.
Hey. So I just got married in this past summer, a bit behind the life timeline behind you guys who have kids. But yeah, getting there. Like that's on the plan, long-term future. But
No
yeah,
worries.
so my wife luckily had a townhome that she's living in.
Yeah.
So she's been hacking away paying the mortgage, but it's a big space. It's like a 3-story level. So
Whereabouts?
yeah, It's just the two of us right now. It's at Warden and St. Clair area.
Cool.
Yeah. So it's I think it's by Mattamy Homes. Like there's a bunch of homes like still being delivered in the
Cool.
being built in this area, like
Yeah.
around the area.
No, it's a popular area. Actually, I was looking to possibly move into that area too. That's a nice area.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Yeah, so they're also building like affordable housing. I think we went to like a town hall where they were talking about affordable housing. So yeah, there's a lot of development happening in this area as well as the crosstown LRT.
Yeah.
So it is a good area to live in. But just for like from an investment perspective, I was actually thinking and talking to her about the potential of renting out some portion of the house and whether we could retrofit it or renovate it such that that's possible.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I don't know the legalities. I know you'd have to probably look at permits and whatnot, but just wondering, in your guys' expertise on the possibilities of even pursuing a project or an idea like that, because it's like a bunch of stacked townhouses. So yeah, I was wondering if that is even possible as an idea, or if it's not.
For sure. Ming, what's the term we use for such an endeavor?
Shit show?
House
hacking.
House hacking.
No. So to be very transparent, it and not to give you a not very useful answer, but it really depends on the individual property. You mentioned at the end that it's a stacked condo?
Townhome.
Is
Like
it a condo townhouse or a freehold townhouse?
Freehold.
Okay, so freehold townhouse, that gives us a little more leeway. Obviously, if it was condoed, you can't really do it. You can't just start ripping stuff out, right? But anyways, please continue, Ming.
Yeah, is there without knowing the layouts, is there a ability to have separate entrance?
I would think so.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so just and the reason this is kind of where my questioning is going. So to develop a secondary unit within a property, we're looking for a couple of things. So one is egress. So for us to have a secondary unit in a property, we need to make sure that there's two methods of egress out of any unit in the property. Two methods of egress can be, two stairwells. It can be a stairwell and a large window, but that large window can't be up high in the property because you have to be able to climb out of it. But basically, if the reason it's there is if there's a fire, you need two options to be able to exit the place. So that's one. That's number one. That's what you're looking for. Two is you're looking for fire separation between units. So if a fire occurs in one of the units, what can I do to prevent the spread of fire between those two units? So generally what you're trying to do is you're trying to close off the two units from each other. So that could be, a stairwell that you have existing that you're going to get rid of that stairwell. So now they're two separate units. You still need your methods of egress. So it may be like a common shared stairwell now instead of an internal stairwell. It could be a separate entrance if it's a basement. There's many like options that you have there, but basically you're trying to create separation between those two units. That will also mean, fire-rated drywall. So if you get a fire in the unit, that the drywall has a certain burn rate, so it takes time for it to burn before the fire spreads.
How long?
I'm not sure what the exact time is, but the type of drywall is
45. I think it's 45 minutes of fire separation between the units.
Yeah, it's called Type X drywall. I don't know what the exact burn time is on Type X, and also that number changes.
Yeah, it's basically it's 5/8 drywall. Normal drywall in a normal house is half an inch drywall.
Yeah,
5/8 is 5/8 inch, so it's a little bit thicker to provide that additional fire separation between units.
You also need interconnected alarm systems. So basically the idea is if there's a fire in one unit, that the other unit is also notified of the alarm. And when you're changing, I don't know how old your property is, but if you're changing the fire alarm to an interconnected fire alarm, you have to come up to current fire alarm standards, which means 1 per bedroom and 1 in common areas. So it's a lot of fire alarms. You end up with like 6 of them or 7 of them, depending on the size of your house. So there's that as well. And then there's the question. So that everything I've talked about so far is how do you meet fire code, right? That's kind of your first hurdle. The second hurdle for you to meet is zone conformity. So what does it allow in your particular neighborhood to have in terms of the type of residencies there? So what I mean by that is if you look at the zoning map for the city of Toronto, you can just Google Toronto zoning map. The city is split up into all these different types of zones, and those zones dictate the type of building that can be that can exist in certain areas. So the one for residential is R zone for residential, and then it's there's usually a suffix which gives you more detail. So for example, RD means residential detached, and anything in that zone that's RD can only be a detached residential property. So we need to make sure that whatever you're doing is not against the current zone for your area. So if you're in a townhouse and it's I can't remember what the suffix is they use for something like townhomes, and it says only townhomes that are single family residents, you could get a multiple dwelling unit in there, but you would need to go through the committee of adjustments to get a variance to the current zoning bylaw. So there's kind of the two things. One is the construction of the place, and one is the zone conformity of the place. And when you meet both requirements, both code and zone conforming, that's what people call a quote unquote legal unit, right? A legal secondary unit. Anything that you see in listings that says like, no, you know, they don't certify the status, or, you know, it's non-conforming.
They call it nanny suite, call it in-law suite.
Basically, it's not meeting one or both of those requirements. So that's, and that is a lot of properties, but if you want to go down the legal route, those are the two things you need to address.
Sorry, I'm actually sorry to interject. There's two things I just want to pull it back a little more high level. So number one, so Sherman, you were saying that there's a lot of space there. You don't need all the space. A simpler option, if this may not be as palatable, but people do this as well, especially condos if they have a second bedroom, is that they actually just have a roommate, right? Without necessarily creating a separate unit for that person. That person just kind of shares your space. So that's one way to go. That's obviously a lot less work and a lot less expense, but less desirable from a living situation, right? And you might be fine with it, or you may not be fine with it, but that's an option. So house hacking can be, you take a primary residence, you separate into multiple units, or it could be as simple as, hey, I'm just gonna rent out another room. Or it could be, I've got a condo, I've got a den, all I need to do is stick a door on the den, and all of a sudden that becomes a second room. So there's different ways to achieve a similar result.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think the other thing to add on to that, Matt, is that if you are looking at, you're open to having somebody in your living space, roommate is one option, but because this is your primary residence, you can take advantage of short-term rentals and not worry as much about the impending bylaws around short-term rentals, because they don't apply to your primary residence if it's within your existing living space, i.e. it's not a separate suite.
Yeah. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that's happening. I haven't been following it as much. I think Ming and Ed have been following it closely, but we're talking specifically with Airbnb. There's stuff that's happening in Toronto with Airbnb. We won't get into it now, but it does have an impact on some people on what they're trying to do. So the second thing I wanted to say was that everything Ming has said is correct. It's technically correct. The zoning and the fire separation between the units. The caveat in Toronto actually is that any single family freehold home, meaning if it is a detached, semi-detached, or townhouse slash row house, is allowed to have a secondary suite without having to necessarily conform to the zoning bylaws. So what that means is that as long as I can meet the fire code and I can build it properly as per building code, I don't need to actually go to committee of adjustments. I don't need to ask for special permission. I can actually just directly apply for permits and build it. If the property can still support, you know, proper fire separation, 2 methods of egress, and everything else. So secondary suites are actually allowed in all freehold, detached, semi-detached, and row houses. So yours as a freehold townhouse, technically from a zoning perspective, you don't have to conform to the zoning bylaws. Toronto allows, there's a municipal bylaw that allows you to build that without having to necessarily ask for all these special permissions.
Yeah, and that's an excellent point, Matt. What I was running through just now is what we would consider like a legal duplex, or it's a very similar process to get to legal triplex.
Yeah, exactly.
Secondary suites, there is one strange caveat that requires the property to be a minimum, I think it's a minimum of 5 years old. Is that correct? Is that 5 or 7 years old? So you can't do it on a brand new house.
Oh, okay,
yeah,
right.
Yeah, there actually has to be like 5 years old. It's a very strange nuance of that particular bylaw.
Yeah. So anyway, Sherman, just gonna punt it back over to you. Has this information been useful to you? Are we going down the right track in answering your question?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's good.
I have a question. So when you have a space and you're not sure, you're kind of in flux, you want to rent it out, you're not sure for how long, is it better to sublet the place? Like, because if you lease it, then after a year, the person has the right to like month to month. And if you reclaim it, then you have to do an N12, right? So if you're kind of in flux and you're not sure what you're going to do longer term, is it better to sublet, or what are the other options? What's the difference?
I'm not sure that you're using the term sublet correctly. So let's just back up. So yeah, if I have a place and I'm going to rent it out and I stick a tenant in there, that's a lease, right? That lease can be a predefined period of time, 1 year, or it doesn't have to be. It could be month to month right off the bat. If that tenant decides that, you know, something happens, they move in with their boyfriend or girlfriend, they get transferred. If they want to leave that unit, then there's 2 options. They can complete, or maybe they're going on a world tour and they're coming back in 6 months or something like that. They have a couple of options. So they can let go of the place, in which case they end their tenancy, or they could sublet it. Subletting it means that they find someone else to take over their position. So they're currently your tenant, and the sublet means that they find someone else to be your tenant. The same contract, the same all the same terms and conditions apply as the original lease. That's what a sublet is. So coming back to your question, how are you using the term sublet?
I'm using it in the sense of I want to rent out a place, but I want to be back in it in a year's time. How do I do that?
So you just make
N12 without having to deal with all of that.
So there's no guaranteed way. One way is you could have a 1 year lease. At the end of the 1 year lease, or prior, like it's 2 months prior to the end of the lease, you issue an N12. You said you don't want to do that. A fixed contract, like you said, as you probably know, at the end of the fixed term contract, it automatically switches over to month. There's nothing you can do about that. Short-term rental is the other option. Again,
is this your primary residence?
Yes.
Okay, so that could be an option for you, is to use short-term rental like Airbnb. because it is your primary residence. Now, the only thing is that needs to be managed then, right? Because short-term rentals, people are in and out every couple of days. And it has to be in an area that you can, attract short-term rentals, right? If you're in the suburbs, that's not going to work.
What if you want to create like a situation where you're leasing it for a year? You want to come back in a year, but you want to avoid the N12, because aren't short-term rentals more like you're renting it out by the day?
Yeah, it's like using Airbnb, if you're familiar with that.
There's a middle ground too, right? You can do a short-term rental, and especially if it's like a short-term fully furnished rental, for example. You can do it for a month, you can do it for 4 months, you can do it for 6 months. I've done short-term rentals this is back when I was younger and had way more energy and time. Whenever I used to go on a vacation, I would go on like a 2-week or 3-week vacation to Europe or Asia or something like that. I used to rent my place out, right? I used to go up on Kijiji or Craigslist, and I used to find someone to take it over. That's just a short-term rental. But I've also been away for, like I moved out of Canada, I moved away to Europe for a year, and I found a short-term renter, right? So there are options for short-term rentals that are not necessarily day by day. So it doesn't have to be day by day. It can still be longer term, but the idea is you're finding someone who has a reason to leave. So for example, they have a 1-year contract here, and they're moving into the city. For example, they're doing a renovation to a house in the area, and they want to move into your place because during that time of the renovation, right? Or there's tons and tons of reasons. Doctors who are here on fellowships is another good one. So there's lots of situations in which people move into the city and only need a place for a short period of time, which isn't necessarily as pain in the ass as day-to-day like Airbnb. So
whereabouts is this? Sorry, go ahead, Matt.
No,
I was just going to ask whereabouts.
Oh,
yeah, I was just going to ask where it's located, the property.
Regent Park. It's a 1-bedroom den, 2 bathrooms, parking locker.
Okay. I was just wondering if it's in the core, another option for you is executive rental. There's a bit of initial cost in the beginning to have it furnished to executive rental levels, but it needs to be in the core. Those properties tend to be about, no more than a 15-20 minute walk away from the financial district.
Okay. And are there particular listing sites for executive rentals, or do I connect with certain companies that can help do that? Or
if you're out in the Regent Park, to be quite frank, executive rentals won't be interested. It's too far. So it does need to be in the core. There's only maybe about 10 buildings that are right in the financial district, which are interested into executive rental companies. If it falls outside of that small radius, it won't meet their client requirements.
Yeah, so that's going through an executive rental agency who specifically works with, big Fortune 500. That's not to say there aren't people who come into the city who are just looking for a place for a couple of months or 6 months. So, you could take that same concept. You just don't have to go to an executive rental agency. You can furnish it yourself. You can rent it out yourself. Like, there's no shortage of people who are trying to live in Toronto, right? Like, we know this. Regent Park, it's not an area that I would traditionally say, oh yeah, this is a slam dunk. But Regent Park is changing a lot. Regent Park is still very close to downtown. So there is an argument to be made that it may work. Maybe you spend, I don't know what the number is, $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 on furniture. And if you're going to move back in anyway, or maybe you take your own furniture and just furnish the place, and just make it attractive to someone who wants to move into the city for a few months.
And so just list it on Kijiji, PadMapper, all those things, and then just say 5-month rental?
Yep.
And the price be the same, but just prorated as like the monthly rent if it was a long-term tenant?
Just a monthly rent, and oftentimes you can get a small premium because it's furnished.
Yeah.
What's the percentage of the premium typically if it's furnished?
A couple $100.
I think we have time for one more question.
Can I just jump on that previous question?
Sure.
It might be shady. So is it a possibility to, in her situation, where she can just quote unquote lease it out to someone she knows, and then that person sublet it to someone else, knowing that she could just get it back in 12 months?
There is no, the subletting is not a slam dunk. That doesn't do anything, because when the subletter is taking on the same terms as the original tenant. So I'm not sure where the idea is of a subletter coming in gives you the right to move back in 12 months. It doesn't work that way.
Oh, I thought
A subletter has all the same rights that the regular rental person has, right?
Okay, got it.
Okay. And when you're doing the sort of like 1 year or 6 months or 4 months, do you still use the standard Ontario lease agreement?
That's a good question. The standard Ontario lease agreement is technically what we're supposed to be using, but there's a little bit of a gray area in terms of can you get away with using something different for short term? And Ming, do you remember what Rick Avery said when he was presenting?
So yeah, that's a little different. They have commercial agreements because they are short term. So basically their agreements, I think it's 60 days max. And anything that goes beyond 60 days, they have to write up as multiple agreements. There is a threshold that the LTB, and I can't remember what it is off the top of my head, that it will fall into their jurisdiction or not fall into their jurisdiction. I don't remember if it's like 4 months or 6 months, but if it's south of that number, then the LTB is not involved in those situations.
Yeah. Cool. All right. So let's see if we can get into one more question. Anyone?
Go ahead. I already asked the question, so maybe someone else.
Oh no, it was just me. I also asked a question.
You're new here, I think, Sherman, so you can go ahead.
All right, I was just going to ask in general for going green. Not really liking, paying the hydro bill every month, and just wanted to see your guys' thoughts, ideas. I don't know if it's related, but yeah, just retrofitting your current setup to go green.
You're gonna stick solar panels on your roof?
Yeah, whatever, right? Like just to knock off some power off the grid. Like I know I've been trying to follow along with the election stuff that's going on and the rebates and whatnot. And yeah, just doing some research on solar myself right now, just to become knowledgeable and aware of it. But I'm not sure if it works out.
Generally speaking, my take is that these are very high capital intensive initiatives, solar panels and whatever, right? Like, sure, there's little things you can do. You can stick with weatherproofing under your door and stuff like that. But like, if you get into like replacing all these windows and I know everyone's scared of hydro, and I know everyone's like, oh my God, the hydro bills. I'll be honest, like, we own a lot of properties and we analyze them. We know the performance of them. It's very common for people when they're starting out to be like, oh my gosh, the hydro is really eating my lunch. The overall, like, let's just go, like, if I came back literally, here, I'm just gonna do a screen share again. Start share. Here, I'm just gonna do the screen share again. Look at what hydro does. So let's look at a 5-year performance of this property. Call it 35% annualized. Let's say I was able to drop my hydro bill from $200 to $100. Did you see how much my return goes up? It goes up like 0.5%. And in order for me to half my hydro bill, man, I've got to like spray foam insulate. I've got to replace all my windows. I have to probably have solar panels. Like, anyway, just to put in perspective, like, I've halved my hydro bill and it does this much to my overall return. I guess my point is that as investors, no doubt we want to optimize our properties and, make them perform their very best. I'm a huge proponent of that, but I do think that there may be bigger fish to fry. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I think where it makes sense for an investor is if you're going through the process anyway. So if you're doing like a major renovation or some of these triplex conversions that we do, where I'm replacing the windows anyway, I'm digging down the basement anyway, and I'm going through that those steps. Well, if I make sure that if I get an energy audit beforehand, and then they come back afterwards, and I've put in the right insulation, the right windows, I've added a sump pump. At that point, then maybe I can apply for the basement flooding protection subsidy program and things like that, because I was digging down my basement anyway. So putting a sump pump in is a prudent thing to do, and having the backflow valve in my out to my sewage is something that's prudent to do anyway, because I'm already touching that stuff. But I wouldn't go and do the projects for the sake of those rebates or those discounts, or to reduce overall costs on the property, because the capital outlay, like Matt said, is just usually far too high for it to make financial sense.
I'd take that capital and try to buy another property. That's just me. But
okay, I think we're at time.
well, I know Ming has to drop off. If you guys have any other questions, I can stick around for another few minutes.
Okay. I'll see you guys later then.
All right, see you, Ming.
Bye.
Okay.
Thank you.
CSS. Did anyone else have any other questions? Jen, this is the first time you've surfaced. I haven't seen you in a long time. You did nothing to ask, nothing to say.
I have questions. I think I'll come in person to ask.
No, ask me now. Come on.
Well, did you hear I bought another condo with Edward?
Yeah, I did. That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a little worried about if it's going to cash flow positively, but I don't have to worry about that yet. So.
Yeah, I think that there's a couple of models that we have, and if Ed hasn't walked you through it yet, then you can ask him to do so. The reason is because pre-construction condos have a slightly different. We use a different analyzer. It's not even realistic to try to use today's rents and stuff like that, right? So
right.
what we do, I'll give you a quick insight, and then you can talk to him further about it if you want. What we do is we actually still project rents. So here, let me do a screen share again. Start share. Okay, screen share again. So in our investment calculator, we have rent increases, and we just go 3% annually, right? That's just a very nominal. Again, it's just like barely above inflation. If you read some of the newspapers, you'll see that all these tenants are complaining to the Toronto Star and Globe and Mail that, oh my God, double-digit rent increases, right? Like, yeah, I sympathize, I empathize. It sucks to be a renter these days. It'd be much nicer to be on the landlord side of things. But anyway, so if we increase rents, so we know that these pre-construction condos have an outlook of when is it projected to be finished?
3.5 years.
Yeah, so you never listen to a builder; they always lie. That 3.5 years is, I will guarantee you, it'll be at least 6 months or 12 months or 18 months delayed. I don't know how long. It depends on the builder. Depends on where are they in the approval process? Have they started digging? All this other crap, right? So projected out, I don't know, 4 years, 5 years, at roughly 4%, 5% rent increase year over year. You're like, okay, if you don't mind, I haven't looked at your deal specifically, but where, how much, how many bedrooms?
So it's King and Dufferin, and
Yep.
the purchase price was $706,900.
Yep.
It's a 1+, but it's kind of like 2 bedrooms, and
Perfect.
it's 2 bathrooms.
Oh, perfect. So you essentially have something that you could call or make a 2-bedroom, 2-bath for $700. That's awesome. How many square feet?
695.
So it's roughly about 1,000 square foot, which is good pricing in a great area. It's still a very transitioning area. I know this because you live there or used to live there,
Right.
Close by. So Basically, if you were to take today's rent for, you know, a 2-bedroom, 2-bath.
Sorry.
Hi. What is today's rent for a 2-bedroom, 2-bath near there? Like your 1+1 at, is it a 1+1 at?
It's a
Gladstone?
it's a 1+1 at Queen and Dufferin, but we
Yeah.
rented that out like 3 years ago
Yeah.
for I think we're getting like 2,100.
Yeah, and I mean, right now, I think you're safe to say that that's probably 2,500, probably.
Right. Yeah, definitely.
And so, I mean, even if you were to take 20, again, Ed can work with you on the specific numbers, but take like 2,500, project that out by, you know, 4% rent increase year over year for the next 5 years. And then you'll end up at some number. I don't know what that number is off the
Right.
top of my head, but call it 2,900, maybe 3,000.
Right.
And now run your analysis at where the rents are going to be over time. That's going to be a more accurate picture of what your cash flow is going to look like.
Okay.
Does that give you some reassurance?
Yeah, it does actually.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Thank you.
I mean, there's a lot of assumptions built into that. So, you know, I don't want to sugarcoat this. You know, people are going to be like, oh, what if rents don't go up? Yeah, I mean, that's a possibility. What if interest rates go up? Yeah, that's a possibility. You know, there's, you know, what if? Our job as investors are to identify the risks and mitigate the risks. We mitigate the risks by identifying good projects in good locations where people want to be, where millennials want to rent, where we know rents are on the rise, where we see the trends, we do the economic fundamental analysis, we analyze where the transit's improving and gentrification is happening. We set ourselves up for success. Is it a guarantee? No, it's not a guarantee. It's never a guarantee. I can never guarantee anything. But what I can say is that we've taken a risk mitigated approach in our investment strategy. Cool?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much.
Awesome. No, it's good to hear from you, Jen. I'm happy to hear that you have a little.
I know. I'm gonna try to come to the next meetup in person.
Yeah, for sure. Sounds good. I could stick around for another 5 minutes if anyone else has any questions. Not too many of you are left.
Okay.
Okay.
Say thanks a lot.
Okay, no problem. Sounds good. Doesn't sound like anyone has anything else to ask.
Well, I have one question.
Sure.
The question is it, because it can be really costly to make a triplex or a duplex like legal, to turn the units legal? How do you go through the analysis of whether or not that's a good idea?
Whether it's a good idea or not. It's going to be
a duplex, and it's not legal. I mean, we could do a triplex conversion or just keep it as a duplex, but you know, it needs a lot of work. There's knob and tube wiring, the roof needs to be redone, water foundation issues. There's just a lot of structural problems, and those have to be addressed in general. But you know, it's just going to cost probably $250K to get it all taken care of.
You're lucky. I'll tell you right now, $250 is if you're lucky. If you're the kind of stuff you're talking about, it's anyway. I don't know your specific property. I do know how much construction costs, and it blows people's minds though. If you did a cosmetic reno on a triplex, that would probably cost $250, just to put in perspective. Anyway, is it worth it? So you have to figure out how much it's going to cost. That's going to be your homework. You need to figure out what you want to do, what it's going to take to address all of these things. Because if you're doing a legal triplex, what you are essentially doing is you need to go get permits, and the only way you can be able to get past close those permits is if you do a whole bunch of work. Yeah, you're gonna have to do all the structural, all the electrical, all the mechanicals, bring them all up to code as per today's code. You're gonna have to make sure that, and then depending on what Ming was saying, the zoning for the area, is that going to allow a legal duplex or legal triplex? If it doesn't, then you have to go to committee of adjustments. In the committee of adjustments, you have to ask for a minor variance, and that minor variance could be because your property doesn't conform to the zoning bylaws for the area where your property lies for what you're trying to do with that property. So you're asking, you need an architect to come to do an assessment. He'll do as-built drawings of your existing place. He'll do drawings for a proposed triplex. He'll look at the zoning for the area. They'll set forth a strategy for you to pursue on whether you need to go to community adjustments or not, and what that strategy will look like, and what the execution of that will look like. You know, do you start construction before you have approval from committee of adjustments or not? Or if you do start construction before you have approval from committee of adjustments, what's your risk mitigation plan if you don't get approval from committee of adjustments? And then when you have those drawings, you have to go get those drawings priced. You have to go get them. You have to tender them out to a whole bunch of contractors to see how much it's going to cost. It's not for the faint of heart. I'll tell you that right now. It's a lot of work, a lot of time, and a lot of money. And however long someone tells you it's going to be, you should budget at least 50% more time and 50% more money than what anyone tells you. So is it worth it? Is it worth it? Will you get higher rents? You'll get higher rents because cosmetically the place will look nicer. You're not going to get higher rents because it's necessarily legal. Tenants don't care about that. However, what other intangibles are there? Yeah, there is definitely value. There's upside because when it's legal, the property could be worth up to 10% more if it's legal for various reasons. From a financing perspective, they can use all the rents to help you qualify for it, which means a prospective purchaser will think that it's of more value because it's easier for them to get financing. There's definitely peace of mind because it's legal, and we're not worried about the city bylaw officers coming and knocking on your door. Right? It's definitely peace of mind because it's fully rebuilt, so that it meets fire code and building code. So there are reasons to do it, and then there's reasons not to do it. It's a very individual thing. It's a very case by case scenario that you'll have to analyze. There is no one size fits all answer, but these are just some of the considerations you should be thinking about as you start trying to figure out whether it makes sense for you. Does that give you a starting point?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Who else is left? Who's Belco Design and Construction? I've been talking about construction. We have a construction guy here. Okay, he's shy. Who else is left? Sherman, Jenny, Cody?
No, I'm good.
Okay, cool.
I'm good, Rob. Thank you.
All right, let's wrap up. Thanks for joining, guys. Hopefully this has been of value to you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, no problem. Good to hear from you, Jen.
Thank you.
All right, bye.